This is an experiment. I realized the other day that a lot of what I do on the podcast is what you call evergreen content, right? Like the interviews, I just put out an interview with David Allen Moore, or all the other hundreds of interviews I've done. Those interviews are just as relevant when I put them out today, or if you happen to find these 5-10 years from now, right? Does that make sense? What we're talking about is not really so much to the moment that we're talking about it. Like, so a lot of what we put on the podcast is about mindset and technique and how you got through different challenges, or just kind of the biographical story of somebody. That stuff's good forever. Now, a lot of what I do, however, is situational. It is of 2016, which is when I'm recording this. So I actually woke up this morning and I realized, what if I start what I'm calling News Hour? So what I've been doing ever since I've done the podcast is I've had this kind of marriage of this evergreen content, and then I share listener feedback and upcoming news and that sort of thing. And I'm just trying to think of ways to make the podcast more useful to people, because I really do think that that's important. Those more time-sensitive things like events and that sort of thing, upcoming activities, people have a bass festival, or there's an audition circuit coming up, or something like that, whatever. So I'm starting News Hour. Today is News Hour. And I've also had a lot of people say, hey, why don't you do some video? So I don't even know if I'll release this, but I am recording video as I'm recording this audio, which means I'm going to try to do this without editing, which I love that idea, because I do spend a lot of time editing, and probably way too much time. So here's how this is going to work. And I'd love your feedback. Feedback at contrabassconversations.com. Let me know what you think of this format. So I'm going to start with some news and just a little reflection on like the most recent interviews. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about David Allen Moore and meeting up with him and some lessons learned from the interview, because that's something I've wanted to do too. There's some other podcasts I listen to, and they'll feature a guest, and then they'll put out another episode kind of reflecting on that guest. And I am Captain Reflection. That's my whole life I've been doing a lot of that, if you can't tell from my writing and the podcast and everything. So I'd like to find a way to do that on the podcast. So this is an attempt to do that. If you have news to share, if you have an event coming up, if you have any feedback to share, feedback at contrabassconversations.com or Facebook, Twitter, whatever. And you can get to all those by just typing contrabassconversations.com/Twitter, /Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest. I don't know if you want to send me messages on Pinterest, but you can. I will get them. So, news. First of all, David Allen Moore put out his episode earlier this week. And if ever there was a candidate for a round 2 episode, it would be with David. I mean, his approach to the bass is so analytical, and he's really, in my opinion, and his opinion shared by many, he's become one of the great minds in double bass pedagogy. I mean, really, his students are, not that the measure of a person's successfulness is how well their students do, but his students are doing very well. They're landing orchestra jobs all over the place, and they're playing just at such a high level, and they speak so highly of David. So I really wanted to reconnect. So we go really deep into technique. If you haven't listened to the episode yet, go back and check it out. It reminded me of 2 things. One was James Harnett, a bass teacher in Seattle, who my teacher, Michael Ovnanian, studied with Jim. And Jim wrote this, I think it was unpublished, but this fascinating but very eccentric double bass technique book. And as I was talking with David about his ideas and his evolution of looking at the left hand, I just couldn't help but think of James Harnett and how his book is laid out. The other thing that it reminded me of is Marcos Machado, who I just interviewed, haven't put out the episode yet, but he wrote a book called The Tao of the Bass. And it's going to be a 4-volume series, and a lot of similar concepts between what David's talking about and what Marcos is talking about. So you look forward to that. It'll be very cool. Now, David and fitness, and just how the transformation, becoming an ultra-marathon runner, and what that did for him and for all these aspects of his life. Man, what a great takeaway. And I love his description of what it's actually like running an ultramarathon. What's it like running 50 miles, running 60 miles, running 70 miles? And the concept of it's more doing 6 miles from point A to point B and then doing 8 miles from point B to point C. What a great way to look at anything in life, right? So, some news. Barry Green, who probably everybody knows, Inner Game of Music author, former principal bass at the Cincinnati Symphony, somebody that I really look up to and admire. And one of the things I admire about Barry is how he has kind of reinvented himself through pursuing his imaginative pursuits. I mean, that's kind of, if I look at his life, I'm putting words into his mouth, but that's something that I see and admire in Barry. And he's really moved into video recently. He's really having a good time creatively experimenting with video. And he put out a message on Facebook, shared it with me, emailed it to me, so I wanted to put it out for you guys. And it's what he wrote is just, at a time of political turmoil and transition throughout the world, I'd like to offer a few minutes of music dedicated to peace, inspiration, and compassion. And it's, I think, a full orchestra arrangement of Claire de Lune, if I remember right. But there's a link in the notes for this episode. And if this experiment that I'm doing here works the way I think it will, anything I yak about, I will link up to, so you can go to the show notes for this episode. And if I do end up putting these out on YouTube, I will put those in the description too. So wherever you're finding this, you should be able to get that link. Okay, more news. Chautauqua in upstate New York, their audition season takes off soon. And I have a link to that. The application deadline is February 1st, 2017. And Owen Lee teaches bass there. I almost went there. I don't think Owen was teaching at this time, but back in the 90s, I think I ended up going to Russia that summer instead. But I've heard such great things about Chautauqua. My youth orchestra director and his wife back in South Dakota, they made their annual pilgrimage to Chautauqua in the summer. And it's kind of this arts and culture festival. It's way beyond just a music festival. There are lectures, there are thousands and thousands of people attend this. Beautiful place. It's kind of near Buffalo. A lot of snow in the winter, but when the festival's happening in the summer, it's just a gorgeous place. So Susan de Weger, I got to learn how to pronounce her name, Susan. She just released a podcast called Beyond the Stage, and I'll have a link to that. Susan has had a very successful career in the world of business and moved back kind of into the music world and is exploring all sorts of things. She's got a website, Notable Values, but this podcast, I like the concept of this podcast. They're 30-minute interviews, they are right now at least, with highly trained musicians who have built successful careers in law, medicine, and business. So she writes, we share career stories, how music education is a unique and valuable training for career success in any industry, their transitional skills, and how they maintain a musical life and identity. Okay, that's awesome. And I wrote back to Susan and said, I have a great guest for you. My wife, who got a master's in harp, subbed with Chicago Symphony and Lyric Opera, and had her own wedding business and all the sort of things that harpists do, and then went and now is in her second year of radiology residency. So it's a cool podcast. Susan's a great host out of Melbourne, Australia. So it's fun to see the music podcasting world continue to evolve and outside of the United States. That's great. So check that out. So some listener feedback. And again, write in feedback at contrabassconversations.com to get a hold of me. Oh, and I have to make sure, and again, I'm doing these live. I usually go through and edit a little bit, but all of our episodes in Contrabass Conversations are brought to you by D'Addario Strings, who's our sponsor. So thank you, D'Addario, for sponsoring the podcast. I'll usually mention my sponsors a little bit earlier in the episode, but D'Addario we're working to get awareness for their Zyx strings right now, which I have on my bass. I have the medium gauge. As soon as I get a free day here, I'm going to put on the light gauge and see how those work. But I really am enjoying these strings. They're very gut-like in their sound, and they're great pizzicato strings. They've got a great growl. I'm really enjoying them on my jackstep with the bow too. I think they have a really interesting, complex sound, and they're made in the USA. They're made in New York at the D'Addario Strings Factory. They're excellent strings, and we have a giveaway right now with D'Addario. So if you go to contrabassconversations.com/strings, you can enter in that giveaway. And thank you, D'Addario, for sponsoring the podcast. And in feedback, and again, write in, let me know how you're doing. Let me know any news, anything at all. And if I keep these news shows going, that's going to be a big part of it. So Lars Swanson wrote in. He says he is a jazz bass performance major at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. Very cool. He says, it's nice to be able to keep up with the Joneses in terms of bass in a very isolated bass community. Thank you for this invaluable resource. And I especially enjoyed your interview with Ruben Rogers. If you haven't listened to that Ruben Rogers episode, that was a blast. Ruben he calls himself a super sideman, or kind of humorously refers to himself as a super sideman. And he is just such a great guy. So much fun to chat with him. So then Lars also asked if I have any advice for approaching doing the ISB Jazz Bass competition. And that's not really my area of expertise so much, but what I did do is refer him to Danny Ziemann, who was one of the placed, I believe, in the last ISB Jazz competition, and is a great guy, and is the author of The Lowdown, which is a very cool book, and there's a second volume to The Lowdown. And Danny's been on the podcast. If you haven't listened to his episode, it was in early September, I think. I got to hang out with Danny in Prague. He was doing a presentation, so I got to see that, and that was very cool. So thank you, Lars, for writing in. And yeah, Danny's a great resource for all things jazz, and especially ISB jazz competitions. Now, Nate Lerohl, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Nate, wrote in, just got this message today, and he and I have met. He's a former Chicagoan. We were hanging out with Greg Sarche, lyric opera bass player, great guy, Greg Sarche, when Miloslav Gajdoš came to town. And I believe I took a video of Gajdoš playing Per Questa Bella Mano and singing the two. And that's something that Gajdoš is known for. And put that up on YouTube a decade ago. And it went, I don't know if viral is the right word, but I think it's got something like 50,000 views. I believe that was from when we were hanging out, Nate. So thank you for writing in. Nate was wondering if I knew anyone who's assembled a digital bass excerpt repertoire. And so I wrote back and I had two suggestions. One is orchestraexcerpts.com. Have you folks checked that out? Have I talked about that? I'm not sure if I've talked about that before. That's new to the web between podcast, 1.0 and this last year, podcast 2.0. But you can go to orchestraexcerpts.com/double bass, and they have, I think you can print out, it's like pretty much all the standard double bass excerpts, and you can, I can't remember if you can listen to them or not. I think you can listen to them, or there's an option to kind of sort of do that. I also created a while ago all these excerpts in MP3 form. This is back in the day. I was just carrying an iPod around for teaching, and I would carry a couple speakers, and I had like Beethoven 5 at all these different tempos at dotted half equals 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, that kind of thing. Those are all on my web, on doublebassblog.org. I have them on Dropbox too. You can find them if you go to doublebassblog.org, or I think if you just type like double bass MP3 excerpts, they should come up. I have a lot of the standard excerpts. I have a lot of the standard solo lit, like Kusevitsky and Bach suites and that kind of thing for practicing. They're not MIDI files, they're MP3s. So you're kind of stuck with the sounds I use and the tempos, but they're at least somewhat useful. And then I have scale files too. So you can find those all on my site, or I can just shoot you a link to them on Dropbox too. If you email me, I'm happy to share that. So also, Nate is living, and this is what I love. I love messages like this. So Nate's living on a little island off the coast of Panama near Costa Rica. Okay, that's an image. That sounds beautiful. Although I can't complain living here in San Francisco. I'm not gonna. But he's built a little solar-powered rainwater eco cabin there, and very cool. He's been touring for the last 8 years on the road, and I see in his Facebook bio that he is the assistant band leader for Cirque du Soleil. Is that right, Nate? Wow. Okay, that is cool for sure. Let me know where you're listening. Some of my favorite, that's a favorite. And then Kazakhstan is one that I really enjoyed hearing. And like rural Australia, West Virginia, isolated West Virginia. I love hearing where people are connecting with these episodes. Manuel Rodrigues wrote in, says he's not a bass player, but he's a luthier, and he asked me, what is the best amount of hair on a bass bow? And I wrote back and said, I do not know, which is what I often write if you ask me a real specific question, because I'm really just kind of a dude who does a podcast. So I'm not 100% sure. I think I referred Manuel to maybe Aaron Riley at Gordon Area House, or Arnold Schnitzer, or somebody. Pass him along to another luthier. And if you ever want to listen to, I've got a luthier. Where the heck do I have that set up? I'll make sure to put a link here. I'm going to write that down. I'll put a link to, I've started like a playlist of all the luthiers that I've had on the show. So you can just go, there'll be a link. Luthier page in the show notes. I told you folks, this is live. So, okay. I'll add that. And I've talked to maybe 8 luthiers at this point, and bowmakers, Sue Lipkins. So some of that info may be in those episodes. Feel free to listen and check it out. And they're good episodes anyway. Irene from Concord International Group. And Concord makes Christopher basses. If you've ever played a Christopher bass, they're based out of Elgin, Illinois, which is suburban Chicago, and has a great orchestra that I used to play in, the Elgin Symphony. Well, Irene has put together this really nice, would make a great holiday gift, this double bass fingerboard and timeline chart. So, and I'll put a screenshot in the show notes here, but it's every note going up, and then on the right is what pitches are in each position. And then on the left is this bass history from, where does it start here? Let's see, 1500. So 1500 to the present, and major figures and that kind of thing. Very cool. And if you want to pick one up, at least right now, I believe it's $15. And just check out the link and you can get it. It's nice if you have a bassist in your life, or if you are looking to spruce up your bass studio. And last bit of feedback for today, Sienna George wrote in. And Sienna is a 16-year-old double bassist from Long Beach, California. She's been listening to the podcast for about 3 years, and Sienna's a big fan. Was principal bass 3 years ago at 13 of the Honors Performance Series, which played at Carnegie Hall, and then went on tour in China with the Pacific Symphony Youth Orchestra and won principal bass of that group this year. And just such a sweet email. Sienna writes, I share your podcasts with all my bassist friends, and it makes us feel like we're part of a great inclusive community. I'm about to hit audition season for several youth orchestras and concerto competitions, and listening to your podcasts keeps me truly enthusiastic to practice with more productivity and endurance. My favorite interviews of yours have been with Alex Hanna, David Allen Moore, and your State of the Orchestra podcast. That is cool. Yeah, that's a blast from the past. John Grillo and I did these State of the Orchestra podcasts. You know what? I think maybe we only did one, but we did. John and I have put out so much content over the years, and we were kind of experimenting back in the 2008 or so, just kind of talking about orchestral life in general. You know, there's a great podcast if you want to get into that called the Per Service Podcast. And it's all about kind of like the state of the orchestra and taking auditions and practicing. It's with 4 musicians. I'm just writing that down here. I will link to that. And they're the folks that actually run orchestraexcerpts.com. And Great podcast. Totally. You should follow along with that. So anyway, Sienna, thank you so much for writing. And that I love hearing about where you're listening, how you're listening, your favorite episodes. And Sienna, you're going to love this. If you haven't listened to it yet, David Allen Moore Round 2. Oh, it's really good. So the other thing, and I'm open to any thoughts or suggestions with these news hours. This is just experiment number 1. And even if you've been doing a podcast like me for 10 years and you're on episode 280, it doesn't mean you know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I know how to do things, but part of what I love about this medium is there are no rules. No, there's no reason that I think that this could actually be super successful, these news hours. I think that this could be a great way to get word out about what's going on in the bass community. And I don't know, Ed, let me know what you think. Do you like this removed as a separate channel from the interview episodes? And I have more experiments coming up here with kind of thinking along those lines. They're still kind of gelling in my mind, so I won't get too specific, but I see a couple other ways to kind of shape the content channels of this podcast. Okay, I'll shut up. So the other thing I wanted to do is share recommendations. And the funny thing is, this is going back to like early days of the podcast. I used to do this on episode 1, episode 2, episode 3 of the podcast. I was going to make a big deal out of sharing like a link of the week and that sort of thing. And I started doing that. And I actually kind of like that idea. I thought, why did I quit doing that? I don't know why I quit doing that. Who knows? But I'm going to start doing that again. So I have recommendations. And it's like what I've been checking out, what's been inspiring me, what I think you would be interested in, aside from the news and the listener feedback. So I have 2 recommendations. They're both podcast recommendations. Sorry about that. But first one is it's from the Brass Junkies podcast. And is it Phil Snedecor? Snedecor? Oh, crap. I can't remember how to pronounce your name, Phil. Sorry. Phil just got a job teaching trumpet at the Hart School. And I listen to I sometimes have podcasts just on in the background and I'm cooking and I'm doing this or kind of just getting my day going. And Brass Junkies, that's one of those things. It's a great podcast. Andrew Hitz and Lance LeDuc. But I don't usually, that's not like the first podcast I click on. No diss, guys. I like your podcast, but it's a couple steps removed from what I'm usually interested in, being a bass player, that kind of thing. But I listened to this episode and I rewound the whole thing and listened again. It is such good advice for anybody, especially for young musicians or anyone looking to do something a little more entrepreneurial. But check it out. Oh, I just was so inspired by that episode. The other one, Tim Ferriss, and I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan for many reasons. He wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, 4-Hour Body, 4-Hour Chef. He's writing a new book called Tools of Titans. I've learned a lot from Tim. I've learned a lot from Tim's interview style, which I think is that's as soon as I started to really pay attention to what Tim was doing interview-wise, that's when my interviews started to, I think, get better. So a lot of, if you listen to my early episodes or like with the more recent stuff with David Allen Moore or whatever recently, I've really picked up a lot listening to how Tim talks about his process and just listening to the way that he delivers things. So Tim has started this branch off of this podcast, for lack of a better word, called the Tim Ferriss Radio Hour, doing essentially what I did with winning the audition. And his new book, Tools of Titans, is kind of like what I did with winning the audition, taking lessons learned from all these people on his show and putting them into a book. And winning the audition is like project 1 of 30 something that in that realm. So I like that name, Radio Hour, and I think I'm going to steal that. I think so. So expect, if I am organized, as you're listening, if you're listening to this right now, I'm actually in Chicago. I probably don't even have any microphones with me. This is all being done in San Francisco before I leave. My wife and I are going for a week, and she's got a conference, so I'm just going to hang out and wander the city and have a good time. But if I do get my act together, you may be hearing episode 1 of the Radio Hour later this week. And at present, it's going to be something about fitness. So I'm pulling how people in their physical fitness, how that's helped them in their career, how they balance that into their life, what they do, what advice they have. I don't know why that seemed like a good place to go after winning the audition, but that's what I feel like. It just seems right to me. So the plan is to do a bunch of these shorter things. Winning the audition was a 4-part series. It was kind of like a weighty work. There are going to be more things in that ilk, this multi-part kind of really trying to help you with something. But right now, I just kind of want to play around and experiment and just get stuff out the door, because projects like winning the audition, I mean, that's like months of work. So I'm going to just take a topic, pull together some highlights from what people talked about on the show previously, and then offer some thoughts of my own and put that out. I think I'm going to call that Radio Hour. I'm stealing that from Tim Ferriss. So I'm going to link up to Tim Ferriss's first Radio Hour. Check out what he did, which was all about meditation, I think. Yeah, meditation, mindset, and mastery, which is one that he put out, which should be a good one for Contrabass Conversations too. Last of all, if you listen this long and you enjoy this format, this totally like turn the mic on and yak and share news and feedback and that sort of thing, let me know. If you think it'd be better to wrap it into the interview episodes, let me know. I'm just experimenting here. If you're interested in helping keep the lights on for this one-man operation, there's a page now, contrabassconversations.com/support. And people have asked me, how can I help? Or how can I donate, or what can I do? And ever since getting the podcast going, and when I still had the full-time job, my answer was just share the episode with a friend. I knew that I wanted to set up some way for listeners to support, but I just wanted to do it right. And I am happy with what I've got now. So it's all on that page, contrabassconversations.com/support. So here's what you can do. You can donate if you want. And anyone who donates $20 or more, I will send you a signed copy of Winning the Audition. And there'll probably be some other gifts at other levels going forward here, but that's what I've got right now. Advertising. D'Addario is advertising. Thank you, D'Addario. And they're a big company. If you are interested in advertising, get in touch and let's talk. It doesn't matter if you're a small organization, medium-sized organization, school, you have a product, whatever, let me know and we'll talk. I've had many advertisers in the past. I want to make sure that I have something that works well for you and me and the audience. And so everything is so individual. So just get in touch, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. You can buy Winning the Audition. That helps the podcast. That's a way to support the podcast. You can also bring me in. I am doing more and more live events, and I'm going to be doing, 95% sure this is how it's going to work. I'm going to be doing in May a cross-country journey from San Francisco to New York to Ithaca for ISB in May. And I'm hoping to organize some meetups, stop in some schools, and just kind of make a whistle-stop tour out of it. So it doesn't matter where you live, except maybe the Pacific Northwest probably doesn't work because that's the opposite. That's the wrong direction. I'm heading to Texas. So that's kind of the direction first, but I'm willing to veer off. But especially if you're anywhere between San Francisco and Texas, or Texas and New York, which is a lot of the country, let me know and maybe we can figure out some sort of live thing we can do. I love doing things live. The David Allen Moore, that was live at his base studio at USC. There's such a great energy to doing live things. I love to do some more group events, and I have so many plans. And since I'm going to be doing that cross-country journey anyway, if you think that time frame will work, let me know. And then some non-financial ways you can support. If you want to transcribe an interview, there are hundreds that need transcription. So that would be great. Send me an email. If you'd like to do a guest interview, I love getting other voices besides mine and the people I'm interviewing on the podcast. That would be wonderful. I love having guest interviews. If you want to leave a review, I'll have links to everything you can leave a review for. You can leave a review on iTunes. You can leave a review on Google Play. You can review the app, the Contrabass Conversations app. You can review Winning the Audition on Amazon. That's all super helpful. And last but not least, certainly share on social media. Email this out to a friend. Tell somebody that you know about the podcast. More than likely, they haven't heard of it. Even though we've got a big audience, I am still positive that most bass players certainly aren't listening regularly and maybe have not even heard of it. So that's another way to help out the show. Thank you so much. We will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.